Hearts Full of Midnight, Chapter 6. Anne Spurlock left cash to retain my services and swept out, sunny as a day in May. Would that every client could be like her. It felt criminal taking her money like this, but I had to say this new twist was an interesting one. It certainly looked as if Michael Spurlock was every bit the cad his wife was starting to believe he was. The other two cases, while not as intriguing, had enough meat to interest me. I took each. By noon, I had more work than I could handle. A background check on a teaching candidate at a private all-boys school, a dodgy insurance claim, and Anne Spurlock's potentially wayward husband. I got the impression none of them were going to be happy with my findings, but they didn't have to, so long as the checks cleared. What I needed, as I stood at the office door watching the insurance guy disappear down the stairwell, was a little tea and sympathy. What I got instead was Marisol Gutierrez. "Mr. Levine," she said. She'd been paid recently, and so her English was almost pristine. "He say call him." "Concerning?" "Mort Peters." I sighed. "He's still dead unless I missed something." "There are problems." "That case was nothing but. Do you have an effervescent on you?" She nodded and produced a small, solemnly decorated foil packet, but I had to fetch my own water from the drinking fountain across the hall. The water cooler guy didn't swing by until day after tomorrow. I dosed myself and went back to my office, where I stared at the wall instead of doing my job. When that didn't satisfy, I picked up the paper and scanned the headlines, front to back. Of course, there wouldn't be anything there. By the time I'd left the Burgess' apartment, it was nearly 11 o'clock, far past when the morning edition would be put to bed. I looked anyway. Marisol knocked on the office door and wanted to know where we were going to start. It'd been a while since we'd had more than one client at a time, and she was as excited as she was capable of being, which is to say there was almost a twinkle in her dead-eyed stare. "The teacher's the easiest," I replied. "We've got his work history in the file the school left us. Start running that down and see if anything funny pops up. Discrepancies in dates, gaps in employment, the like. And make sure to confirm with his old bosses he left for the reasons he gave. Call, don't write. But see if they can mail us whatever they have. After that, check with the police department and the places where he lived. See if anyone has a file on him. I'll check in with Stash at police headquarters to see if there's anything local, and then I'll do the same with the LA County Sheriff's Department. I can look up the insurance claimant while I'm there, kill two birds with one stone." "Are you leaving now?" she asked. I told her I was, and not to expect me for the rest of the afternoon. After all of that, I would take a ride over to City Hall, since I'd be halfway there once I was done at the Sheriff's Department. Maybe they'd have a practical reason for why Michael Spurlock was going out of town so often. City Hall was convenient because the flower shop was on the way. Traffic was light, and I was able to tool my powder blue Chevy into a space across the street so I could peer through the plate glass windows at what was going on inside. Sally Burgess was picking up a shift that day. She wore a blue and white flower print dress that was too on the nose for what she was doing. Her face bore a smile, but the eyes were as tired and haunted as I'd seen them the night before. No one paid them any attention, nor did the customers appear to ask how she was doing. They didn't care. It was a funny thing we did, believing that customers in flower shops usually cared about their fellow man. That's why they were buying flowers in the first place, their actions said. But it wasn't the case, nor would it ever be. A person coming at you with a bouquet of flowers was carrying a dead thing, a tightly bound batch of corpses held together with a rubber band or a piece of string. It didn't get any more desperate and oblivious than that. The look in Sally Burgess's eyes said she was the only flower shop girl in the world who saw the irony for what it was. Chapter 7. The morning was busy for her, but I was determined to wait until everyone had cleared out. I needed to know now before I went anywhere else. Usually, I could juggle more than one thing in my head at a time, work more than one angle to get done what needed doing. Today, I couldn't. I'd been met the night before with something I knew without knowing, yet it remained inexplicable to me at the same time. I had to find answers before I could do anything else. The problem was, I didn't know any of the questions. She took a break about 10 a.m. The shop had cleared out of little old ladies and guilty husbands who'd forgotten an important date. I watched her pour a cup of something hot from a thermos she kept under the counter, taking the drink and a cigarette outside to the bottom step of the staircase up to their apartment, where she sat. I kept out of her sight as I crossed the street. I didn't know how she'd react seeing me again, but I didn't want to spook her. I needn't have bothered. She smiled a little when she saw me round the corner. It wasn't a happy smile, nor was it particularly warm. It was like her face was doing what it knew it was supposed to do. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," I replied. "How are you feeling today?" "Better, thank you." She smoked and eyed me. "I must have given you a terrible fright last night." For a moment. I took out a cigarette and she passed me her matchbook. It was midnight blue and bore a name in swirling gold script. When I was satisfied with my light, I passed it back to her. "The Regal," I said. "Never heard of it." "It's a club," she said. "I worked there as a cigarette girl before I met my husband." "Did you meet there?" She shook her head. "That matchbook is new. Did you go dancing there recently?" Again, she shook her head. "We don't go dancing. We don't go anywhere, really. We just do our same little thing every day. That's our life together, Mr. Hardwood." I grunted, preferring to smoke instead of answering out loud. "You don't seem all that surprised. You must already know what all of this is." I shrugged. "Could be that I know, could be not," I said. "The smart play is always keep what you think you know to yourself until you're sure of it. After that, you can be smug and strut around like you have all the answers." "Sounds like good advice. So, why are you here? Is it really to check up on me?" "Because I'm fine now. It was just a moment, but that's over with." "Is it?" "You don't sound convinced. So, I guess that's the real reason for your visit. And here I was thinking I had a handsome man calling after my own health and well-being." "I am, after a fashion." "And what fashion is that?" "You stay healthy so long as your husband does. If he should go some other direction and you're to blame, they'll walk you straight into the death house. You have to know it." "Assuming they know who did it." "Mrs. Burgess, when I found you last night, you were standing in the middle of your apartment with your husband's loaded gun in your hands. Say I hadn't come along and events had gone the way they looked like they would. No, don't. Don't sing me any songs about your innocence. It's just a hypothetical. You can stand a hypothetical, can't you? Well, so what of it? Do you think you could have somehow avoided the cops noticing that you'd had something to do with your husband's death? It's just that, from what I've seen, you lack the kind of cunning it takes to kill a man and get away with it." "You don't know what I'm capable of." "Oh, I have a decent idea," I said. I let the rest of that thought hang unspoken on the air. She finished her cigarette and started nursing her tea. She held it in both hands, trying to look like a little girl who needed both to keep a decent grip on the cup. Or she was trying to appear cold, even though the morning was already 80 degrees and climbing. "Are you going to report me to the police, Mr. Hardwood?" I made a non-committal noise in my throat. "What do I have to do to convince you I'm not a threat?" she asked. Nothing radical. Just don't do anything rash, and over time I'll stop coming around to check up on you. So, that's what you plan to do, is it? Come around often? Until I'm satisfied. And what if I just wait you out and then do the deed? I took the cigarette from my mouth and considered the smoldering end of it. It burnt down so it looked like it had a point. You're not that cold-blooded, Mrs. Burgess, whatever you'll have me believe. Anything you do, it'll be in the moment. So if it's going to happen, it'll happen soon. You certainly won't be able to wait me out. I wouldn't bet on that. I'm not worried. Listen, tell me something. Sure. Why do you stay? I know you're bored. I'm not bored, she replied. I'm terrified.